There is a particular kind of exhaustion that comes from being performed at, not the exhaustion of difficult work or of genuine emotional demand, or of the kind of sustained effort that produces tiredness because it has required something real. This is a different exhaustion, the specific, hollow fatigue of a person who has been in rooms full of people for a very long time and who has understood, across those rooms, none of the people in them are actually present. They are all performing versions of themselves calculated to produce a specific impression in a greenoon, a specific audience, and the specific audience is him, and the performances are thorough, and he has been watching them for 15 seasons and could, at this point, script most of them before they begin. Duke Julian Ashcroft, known to the ton as the Ice King, a designation he had not chosen and did not particularly object to, because the designation had the advantage of managing expectations in a way he found efficient, was profoundly, comprehensively, bone-deep bored, not with the world, with the performance of it. He was bored with the carefully managed laughter that meant nothing, bored with the practiced opinions delivered in the specific register of a woman who has identified what a man like him is thought to find intelligent and has calibrated her expression of intelligence accordingly. Bored with the curtsies and the silk and the conversations about nothing significant, conducted with the intensity of people for whom nothing significant was the entirety of the available material. He had built his cold reputation not from cruelty, but from the specific, efficient recognition that the performance never ended, and the cold was the only thing that made it bearable. If he kept the distance, the performances were shorter. If the performances were shorter, the exhaustion was more manageable. This was the logic of the Ice King, and it was not wrong, but it was also, though he would not have said this, lonely in the specific way of people who have solved a problem efficiently and have not noticed that the solution has costs. Then Daisy Whitmore stepped out of his rosebush with a muddy kitten and ruined everything. She had not come to his garden party for him. She had come because their families were neighbors, and the invitation had been issued, and refusing it would have required more social navigation than accepting it, and she had accepted it and spent the first 40 minutes of the party doing what she generally did at events organized around appearances, which was ignore the appearances and investigate the parts of the environment that were actually interesting. The rosebush by the East Fountain was interesting because there was a sound coming from it, and the sound was a kitten, and the kitten was more important than the marble terrace and the white gloves and the particular social consequences of stepping off the designated paths into a rosebush in a good lace dress. Before we get to the greenhouse, before we get to the rain and the leaf in her hair and the moment Julian's careful, maintained, 15-year-old distance simply ceased to function, I need to ask you something. Have you ever been in the presence of someone who was completely, genuinely, unself-consciously themselves, not performing, not managing, not calculating the impression they were making, and felt, in the presence of it, something that was less like attraction and more like relief? The specific relief of a person who has been in a room of performances for too long and has suddenly encountered something real. Drop your answer in the comments. Because that was what happened to Julian Ashcroft on a Tuesday afternoon in June when a woman stepped out of his rosebush with a kitten and told him to hold it. He did not fall in love at that moment. He simply encountered, for the first time in a very long time, something that was not performing at him. And he did not know, yet, what to do with that. Subscribe and hit the bell. Tell me where you are watching from tonight. Your city, your country. Let me know who is in the room. Now, let's begin. The garden party had been organized by his secretary with the specific, efficient thoroughness that his secretary brought to all organizational tasks, which meant it was impeccable in every external detail and entirely hollow in every internal one. The flowers were correct. The food was correct. The guest list contained the appropriate number of appropriate families in the appropriate proportions. The weather had cooperated. Julian stood near the East Fountain and was correct in every external detail and entirely hollow in every internal one. He watched the ladies of the ton move through his garden with the performing quality he had catalogued across 15 seasons. The careful management of posture, of expression, of the specific angle at which one held a teacup when being observed by a duke, as though the angle of the teacup were a form of communication, which, in the Ton's particular language, it was. He received their conversations with the composed attention of a man performing attentiveness, and he returned the appropriate responses, and he experienced none of it as anything other than the specific, familiar texture of a Tuesday afternoon he had had many times before. Then the commotion started at the East Rosebush. Not a loud commotion, not a crisis commotion, not the kind that required intervention. The kind produced by rustling and the particular sound of thorns catching fabric, and a voice saying something in the middle distance that had the quality of someone talking to a small animal rather than a person. Encouraging, patient, the specific register of a woman who had found a problem and was addressing it with her full attention, regardless of the social context in which the addressing was occurring. He watched her emerge from the rosebush. The lace dress was torn, a significant tear, the kind that a careful woman would have found mortifying, the kind that other women at this particular garden party had already noticed, and whose noticing had produced the specific ambient quality of a group of people experiencing someone else's social catastrophe from the comfortable position of not being the one it was happening to. She did not appear to have noticed the tear. She was looking at the kitten, small, grey, muddy from the garden bed, shivering in the specific, operatic way of kittens who have been cold and frightened and are now in warm hands and have decided to communicate the full extent of their recent ordeal. She was looking at it with the expression of a woman who has just rescued something and is satisfied with the rescuing and is now determining the next required step. The next required step, apparently, was him. She crossed the terrace with the directness of a person who has identified a destination and is going to it. And the destination was him, and he watched her come with the specific, slightly paralyzed quality of a man for whom the events of the past 30 seconds have not fit any available category, and who is still in the process of locating the correct one. She held out the kitten. "Hold him for a moment, Your Grace," she said. "He's shivering, and pray tell your gardeners to trim those thorns. They are an absolute hazard to small creatures." She put the kitten in his hands. She did not ask whether he wished to hold it. She did not qualify the request or manage it for the social hierarchy of a woman making a request of a duke. She simply put the kitten in his hands and went, with the same direct, purposeful quality, in the direction of the refreshment table where she appeared to be looking for a saucer of milk. Julian stood on the marble terrace of his impeccably organized garden party and held a muddy kitten in his white-gloved hands. The kitten looked up at him. He looked at the kitten. Around him, the Ton observed this scene with the specific, collective quality of 400 people who have all simultaneously encountered something that does not fit the established protocols of the occasion and who are processing the encounter in real time. She had not curtsied. She had not lowered her eyes, or managed her voice, or deployed any of the social machinery that every other person at this gathering had arrived with and was operating continuously. She had treated him like someone whose hands were available and whose garden needed maintenance advice. She came back with the milk. She took the kitten back, efficiently, without ceremony, and she sat down on the low wall near the fountain and offered the saucer to the kitten, who had not yet decided whether to trust the situation, but was considering the milk seriously. Julian stood and watched her. The kitten accepted the milk. She smiled at it, genuinely, without audience, the smile of a person who has accomplished something they wanted to accomplish, and whose feeling about the accomplishment has nothing to do with who is watching. Julian realized, with the specific quality of realizing something that has been true for a moment but is only now being acknowledged, that he had not looked away from her since she stepped out of the rosebush. Their families being neighbors was the kind of fact that Julian had known for years and had never previously experienced as consequential. The Whitmore estate adjoined the eastern edge of his own, and the Whitmores were people who existed in his social world in the peripheral way of families of adequate standing who were neither politically significant enough to require active cultivation nor sufficiently in his way to require active management. Daisy Whitmore had not previously been a feature of this background. She became a feature of it with the specific, unavoidable quality of things that, once encountered, reorganize the landscape they appear in. She appeared in his library on a Tuesday morning in July, apparently on the basis of his housekeeper, having mentioned that the Ashcroft Library was comprehensive on the subject of Gothic fiction. She had introduced herself to the housekeeper. The housekeeper had, apparently charmed, as Julian was beginning to understand people were charmed by her in the specific way of people who have encountered someone entirely genuine and found the encountering pleasant. Shown her in, and she had been reading in the east window for 2 hours before Julian discovered her there. He had stood in the doorway of his own library and looked at Lady Daisy Whitmore, who had removed her shoes and tucked her feet beneath her on his priceless velvet sofa, who was reading a Gothic romance novel with the specific, undivided attention of someone for whom the novel was the entirety of the current world, and who was, at the moment he appeared in the doorway, laughing out loud at something on the page with the genuine, full-bodied laugh of a person who finds something actually funny and is expressing this, without managing the expression for the benefit of any observer. She had not yet noticed him. He stood in the doorway for a moment. That was longer than the necessary moment for deciding what to do. "That's excellent," she said to the book, apparently complimenting the plot development, and turned the page. He went in and sat at his desk and opened a document, and did not, for the following hour, read the document with anything like the attention he ordinarily brought to documents. She came back on Thursday. She came back the following Tuesday. She came back with an informality that was not rude, but was completely uninterested in the social protocols that governed library access in ducal households. She did not try to impress him. This was the thing that Julian found himself returning to, in the quiet of his study when she had gone. Every woman he had spent time with in 15 seasons had been, to varying degrees of skill and subtlety, trying to impress him. The trying was visible in small ways. The careful management of the conversation toward topics they believed he valued, slightly elevated register of vocabulary, the opinions delivered with the particular quality of opinions that have been tested against the estimated preferences of the audience. Daisy, reading Gothic fiction on his velvet sofa with her shoes off, wanted nothing from him. This was not cold, it was not dismissive, it was simply, genuinely, unremarkably, entirely the behavior of a person who was in the room for her own reasons and who experienced his presence as comfortable rather than significant, the way people experience the presence of furniture that is in the right place, noticeable when it is wrong, entirely unnoticed when it is right. He found this, against every expectation, the most comfortable he had been in a room with another person in several years. She asked him, on a Wednesday in August, what he was actually like. "You know," she said, from behind the Gothic novel, "everyone in the county is terrified of you. You are aware of this?" "I am aware," he said. "Does it bother you?" He considered this with more attention than the question would ordinarily have received from him. "It is efficient," he said. She looked at him over the top of the book with the expression she wore when she found something worth thinking about. "Efficient," she repeated, not mockingly, with the specific, considering quality of a person tasting a word and finding it interesting. "That is either the saddest thing I have heard this week, or the most honest. I have not decided which." He looked at her. She had gone back to the book. He thought about efficient for the rest of the afternoon and found it, upon examination, both things simultaneously, which was an unusual result for a word he had used to describe his own social strategy without particular examination for 15 years. The greenhouse was at the estate's eastern edge, a glass structure built by his grandfather for the cultivation of plants that did not naturally survive the English winter, warm and humid, and full of the particular, a live quality of a space in which things were actively growing. They had gone there because she had asked to see the orchids, and he had offered to show her because offering had been the natural thing, and he had stopped some weeks ago, examining why natural things felt natural when she was involved. The rain came in from the west with the specific, total quality of a summer storm that has decided not to be gradual about it. One moment the sky was the overcast grey of a building storm. The next moment the greenhouse glass was running with water on every surface, the sound enormous and close and enclosing, as though the rain had made the greenhouse its own. And they were simply inside what the rain had claimed. He expected her to react as women at his garden party had reacted to the unexpected, with the specific, managed distress of someone for whom disruption to the planned event was a social event in itself. She sat down on a wooden crate near the orchids. She tilted her head back, she closed her eyes and listened. The rain on the glass had a rhythm, complex, varied. The sound of water finding its own pattern on a surface that offered it multiple paths, producing the specific, layered quality of something that was not quite music, and was not quite noise, but was somewhere in the territory between them that required a particular quality of attention to appreciate. She was giving it that attention, completely, without the self-consciousness of a person who knows they are being observed, being appreciative. She was simply in the sound. Julian stood a few feet away and watched her in the grey rain light, which was the specific light of a summer storm filtering through a glass ceiling, diffuse even, the light of a world that has been temporarily softened. And he felt something move through him that he did not have an immediate name for, something quieter and more complete, the feeling of a room that has been cold for a long time and in which a window has just been opened. To the summer he stepped closer. There was a leaf in her hair, small, green, from the orchid plant near the crate. It had fallen there at some point in her sitting down, settled into the dark of her hair, with the casual, accidental quality of things that land where they land without caring about the landing. He looked at it. He reached out and took it, gently, carefully, with the specific attention of someone doing something small that they are giving the full weight of their attention. She opened her eyes. She looked up at him with the expression that was simply her face, which was the expression of a woman who is entirely present in the moment she is in and who is not in this moment performing any version of it. "Your Grace?" she whispered. He looked at her. He felt the specific, complete quality of a man who has encountered the limits of his own defenses, not because the defenses were breached or overcome or dismantled, but because they had, in the presence of this particular person, in this particular light on this particular afternoon, simply ceased to be operative. She was not attacking anything. She had never been attacking anything. She had simply been present, with the specific, total quality of a genuinely present person, and his defenses had nothing to do with that, and had therefore stopped doing anything. He was completely, utterly defenseless. She hadn't worn her finest jewels. She hadn't whispered sweet things calculated to produce his attention. She hadn't tried, in any form he could identify, to be anything other than what she was, which was herself, which was the most disarming thing a person could be. The rain continued on the glass. Neither of them said anything, because the thing that was happening did not require language yet. The autumn ball at Pemberton House was the social event of the new season. Marquis Hartwell was a man who moved through the ton with the specific confidence of significant inherited wealth and a correspondingly reduced sense of the limits of his own license. He had read Daisy as easy. He had read her the way men who do not look carefully read women who are genuinely themselves, as unbothered, and mistaken the unbothered for unprotected, and decided on the basis of this misreading that she represented a manageable situation. When the conversation had not gone the way he expected, because conversations with Daisy never went the way people expected, he had made the mistake of saying, in the hearing of a group of lords whose attention he was performing for, something about wild behavior, and whether it was entirely seemly. He said it with the specific, careless quality of a man who has decided that the target of the remark is not significant enough to defend herself effectively. He had not looked to his left before he said it. The shadow arrived before the sound. The specific quality of a large person stepping into a group, with the authoritative efficiency of someone who is not requesting space but simply occupying it. Julian looked down at the Marquise. He looked at him with the expression that the ton had been calling cold for 15 seasons, which was not cold, but was something more precise than cold. The expression of a man who has assessed a situation completely and has organized his response around the assessment. Julian said, "You will watch your tongue when speaking of the future Duchess of Ashcroft, Marquis." His voice was the parliamentary voice, the voice that carried in rooms without being raised, that had the quality of inevitability about it. Her spirit is a light this world desperately needs, and if you dim it even slightly, I will ensure your family fortune is erased by morning. The specific color change that faces undergo when the blood makes its decisions about where to be occurred across Hartwell's face in approximately 4 seconds. Julian held his gaze for a moment longer than necessary to convey the message, because the additional moment was the part of the message that required no words. Then he turned to Daisy. "Future Duchess," she said to him quietly. "That is the first I have heard of that." "Yes," he said, "I am aware." His private study was the room in Ashcroft Hall that was most entirely his, the small study at the back of the east wing, the one with the window that faced the garden, with the specific, accumulated quality of a room that has been used for solitude rather than productivity, and that therefore had the quality of a space that knew its occupant. Daisy was on the sofa, her shoes were off. She was unusually quiet, not her ordinary quiet of someone absorbed in a book or listening to something, but the quiet of someone who is thinking about something and whose thinking has produced in them a quality of stillness that was different from her ordinary, animated presence. "Julian," she said. "Why did you say that?" she said. "The ball. I never tried to make you love me. I am a mess. I don't fit in your perfect cold world." She said it with the specific, direct quality of her most genuine questions, the ones that were not social questions but actual inquiries, the ones she asked because she wanted to know the answer and was not managing the asking for an audience. He looked at her on the sofa, unshod, with her legs tucked beneath her in the specific, particular way of a person entirely at home in a room that was not hers, which was the thing about her that had done what no amount of precision or performance had done across 15 seasons. She was entirely at home everywhere she was, not because she was entitled to the space, not because she had earned the space, but because she had never been in the habit of asking permission for her own presence. She arrived in rooms and was in them, completely, without the specific ambient anxiety of someone who is not sure whether they belong. He crossed the room. He sat down in front of her, not in the chair, not at the appropriate social distance, but directly in front of the sofa, which was not a position the stiff aristocratic posture of the Duke of Ashcroft was built for, and which he adopted anyway, because the moment required. He took her hands. He looked at her, the warm smile, the one that the ton had decided 15 years ago he was incapable of, on the basis of never having seen it, which was because there had never been an occasion that produced it, arrived on his face with the specific, genuine quality of something that has been there all along and has simply been waiting for the correct occasion. "That is exactly why, Daisy," he said. His voice had the quality of a man saying something true in the voice he used when no one was watching, the voice that existed when the performance was not required and he was simply himself, which was the only voice she had ever wanted from him and the only one she had ever prompted. "Everyone else brought a chisel to break my ice. You simply brought the summer." He looked at the hands he was holding, small, capable hands with a faint ink stain on the right index finger from something she had been writing that morning, and which she had apparently not noticed, or had noticed, and had not addressed, because addressing it would have required stopping whatever she was doing, and the whatever was more important than the ink. He pressed a kiss to her knuckles, not the formal kiss of a social greeting, the specific, fervent quality of someone putting their lips to something they have been circling for a long time and have finally arrived at. "You stole my heart without even trying," he said, his face still close to her hands, looking up at her with the expression that was not the Ice King's expression and had never been the Ice King's expression and was simply his. "And I never want it back." Daisy looked at him. She leaned forward and she kissed him on the forehead, which was not the gesture he had been expecting, which was, in fact, precisely the quality of the gesture, that it was not the expected one, that it was her gesture, the gesture of someone who does what is genuine rather than what is correct. And then she looked at him from very close range with her wide, honest eyes. "You are significantly less cold than advertised," she said. He laughed. Not the polite, managed acknowledgement of something mildly amusing. The actual laugh, the one that existed underneath the 15 seasons and the efficiency and the cold, the laugh of a person who has found something genuinely funny and whose body has expressed this without consulting the social protocols first, filled the study. It surprised him. She grinned at him with the specific, delighted quality of a person who has just produced something she did not entirely predict, and who finds the producing of it entirely satisfying. Outside the east window, the garden was doing what gardens did in autumn, settling into itself, the summer's extravagance giving way to the quieter, more considered quality of the later season. The rosebush by the east fountain, where everything had started on a Tuesday in June, was beginning to do what rosebushes did when the year was turning. Inside the study, the Ice King, who was not an Ice King, who had never been an Ice King, who had been a man who was tired and had built something cold to manage the tiredness, and who had been melted, accidentally and entirely, by a woman who had never once intended to melt him, sat in the warm light with the woman who had brought the summer, and was warm. Tell me in the comments which moment stayed with you. Was it the kitten on the marble terrace, the Gothic novel on the velvet sofa, the leaf in her hair in the greenhouse, the ballroom declaration, or the forehead kiss in the study, and the laugh that surprised him? Drop it below. I want to know what you are carrying from this one. And tell me where you are watching from. Your city, your country. Let me know who is in the room tonight. Subscribe and hit the bell, because the next story opens with a duke who has been writing letters to a woman he has never met for 3 years. Letters that began as estate correspondence and became, somewhere in the 2nd year, something else entirely, and the morning she appears at his door in person. For the first time, he understands that the handwriting he has been in love with belongs to a face he was not prepared for. And what he does with the not prepared for is the whole story. I'll see you there.